Welcome to the App Advisory Show, your fortnightly dose of all things cloud accounting, apps, and app advisory.
Hey guys, Matt Flanagan here. So another session, an episode of the App Advisory Show, and I'm delighted to have Wayne here from Old Mill. So Wayne, do you want to tell us a little bit about you and your role?
Yeah, sure. Good. Thanks for having me, Matt, by the way.
No worries.
So I work for Old Mill. We're sort of a 250 staff firm, 4 offices across the Southwest. And my role is in the digital business services team.
Okay.
So I sit in that team. I sort of help with, the health checks, the app implementation, but then I also get into the other side of things, which is rolling it out across the firm. So what our digital strategy is, where we're trying to get to, and then helping to roll it out. So in terms of systems and processes, pricing, internal communication, that type of thing.
Okay. And just touching on that, so you've got an external facing, so you're actually living and breathing and doing the practical part of the theory. So you're actually really building this out for the firm and getting involved with clients so you can test and define and refine your processes and your services. So that's the one hat you're wearing. But then you're also looking at it from an internal awareness, education, because it's as new to some of your colleagues as it is to the SME world, right? So
yeah,
how are you finding that? Has that been interesting?
It is an interesting one, because I think you would have thought the most difficult thing would be talking to the clients and actually getting out there and rolling out the products that you're offering. But I would say the more difficult thing is the internal thing. So in terms of getting the message to all of the advisors that we have at Old Mill, telling them where we are and where we aren't. And I think that's probably one of the biggest points where we actually aren't at this stage in time. So they don't go and then oversell something, come back to me and say, by the way, Wayne, you've got to do like a massive stock integration with Unleash. I'll be straight on the phone to you, Matt.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I think that's really key, isn't it? Because when we're talking about the awareness, it's just a cloud accounting system and a few apps, right? That you can do all 900 or 1,000 or a million or whatever's connected. So understanding like those parameters where you start and stop and who your third parties are for maybe some of the specialisms that you'll work with, and obviously got Blue Hub which do that in one area, but there's multiple other partners for other areas. So it is sort of understanding where you start and stop as a firm, but then also who you could start to pull in should you need some extra help with complex areas. So that is one of the challenges I think that you have to learn yourself, but then also trying to educate people is quite a challenge, and I'm sure you'll re-educate them over and over again, right?
Yeah, and I think, like you said, having an app stack, so this is one of the things you talk about in your course, is so important, because if you can have an app for every different area of a client's business, expenses, payments incoming, outgoing, that type of thing, it just gives you somewhere to go, and you don't get overwhelmed with everything that's in the marketplace.
Yeah,
because like you said, there's over 900 apps. So anyone looking at this space now would go, how on earth am I going to do this? But actually, having that app stack is quite important.
Yeah, and I call it parameters genius, right? There's areas which you're going to be really strong at. It's accounting, but financial control. The finance function is a great place to start and understanding that every single client will need umpteen apps. They might just need 2 or even 1, and not getting overwhelmed with what potential could be. Just like, what do they need, and is that 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 apps? Highly unlikely straight away you're going to go and implement 12 apps in with any business, really. And I think that's the concern when you get into this, is like, I need to know everything about everything in case I get asked some questions. So
and also some of the basics as well. So having a look at Xero and how Xero works, because I think some people just skip to the app straight away, but actually there's so much you can do in Xero, and Xero is getting better and better. We've already seen them take over HubDoc. They've got a 30-day cash flow forecast. What's next? So keep an eye on what Xero are doing, because they're actually starting to bring stuff in-house as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll come on to a bit of optimization and the challenges with that, and how we need to, like you say, keep an eye on the core products and also the ecosystem, because they're both growing. But in terms of with Old Mill, what's your background? Was there anything pre-Old Mill, and what have you done in Old Mill before you go into this digital role?
So I've been at Old Mill for 9 years.
Oh, okay.
So quite a while. It shows me how old I am, to be honest. But I've been through various different roles. So I used to do audit. I've done small business. I've even done business development. So I did a year in business development. And then recently, so I started in July in the digital business services team. And that's my latest role. But I think having all those, audit background and that small business background has been so important going into this, because you're almost pretty much doing mini audits when you start to do some of the services.
Right, okay, interesting.
So yeah, that comes in pretty useful. But I mean, the way it's changed over that time is massive, isn't it? You look at an accountancy firm, 9 years. We've gone from paper records and massive boxes being delivered, putting things in spreadsheets, printing out things into a folder. The reviewer looks at it, scratches it off. You put the next paper on there, to something which is much more exciting. In the cloud accounting space now, it's forward thinking, and I think we can help clients in time. That's one of the biggest differences.
Yeah.
So before, you look at a set of accounts which was, say 6 months out of date, whereas now we can help client from now and into the future. So we can look at their forecasting, and then we can look at any funding requirements. Yeah. And that for me, I get much more excitement out of.
Yeah, so you're much closer to what's happening right now, means you can help them with some informed decisions and give them much more clarity on where they're at, right? Which is, I think society-wise, we're after that in general. I think we're all after a bit of information a bit quicker, not just in accounting. Just, you'll mention something today, I don't know what it is, and I Google it or Wikipedia it, and I've got a better idea than I did 5 minutes ago. So I think there's always going to be that societal change, and I think this pandemic has certainly brought an awareness that we can get things quicker than maybe we're used to.
I think you raised a good point on one of your courses, actually, where you said that, like, you look at Amazon now, it's next day delivery, but actually they're moving to an hour delivery slot. And although it's a different industry, that's what people expect. Yeah. So they expect that in the accountancy world as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I got really disappointed about Amazon. They promised me something by 10 o'clock I think it was like 3 days ago. And then it moved to like the next morning. And I was so disappointed.
Yeah.
I was like, oh God. And literally, I'm going to be asleep anyway. If I get it at 10 o'clock, I'm probably going straight to bed and look at it the next morning. Yeah. So I didn't really lose anything, but just the disappointment of the expectation was like, I'm going to get it that day. So I think it's, that's the expectation that just general society is setting, and the ease of use. Like in retail, I've bought a pair of walking boots, been trying to walk regularly. They've split, they weren't cheap, but the refund and exchange policy, God, it's been so easy. Like a message, can I return these? Take a picture on my phone, send it over, bang, they're here tomorrow. It's like, how easy is that now? To be, and that's the expectation that'll just happen with everything.
Yeah, so like you said, accountancy wise, you want to know what your profit is now, straight away, just a click of a button.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, so I mean, we talked a little bit about your background in Old Mill, and I think you're really in a good position because of that rounded roles that you've had. You've been around different parts of the business. You've interacted with businesses differently, like an audit and a biz dev is entirely different type of roles. So that stands you in good stead for like this rounded SME digital advisor. I think it really sits quite well. And no doubt in audit, you'll see some really clunky stuff. And now you're seeing this new digital world, which is coming along. But before you got heavily involved in July in the digital, what was your interaction with cloud systems and digital before that?
So I knew a bit about it. And so I have 2 of my own businesses as well.
Okay.
So for those businesses, I use Xero. So I was dabbling a bit with the bookkeeping side. Yeah. And I was getting interested in what it could do, but I wasn't as in deep as I am now.
Yes.
So now I'm looking at all the apps and the integrations and how we can also roll out across the firm. Whereas before I just knew about them. And to be honest, I was quite scared about the whole eco space, because you look at it and you think there's just so much out there. How on earth could I possibly learn all this stuff? Yeah. So I probably was in that space. I was using it for bookkeeping, but not much else.
Yeah. Okay. And it's interesting about your, like, even with your business hat on, like your business owner hat on, as well as your accountancy firm hat, that fear of overwhelm. And I think this is something we forget about, that we're overwhelmed in the accounting profession when we're looking at this. But imagine as a business owner, you've just signed up to a cloud accounting system, and now there's 900 apps. Like, at least we've, you've been to a Xerocon, a QB Connect, a Accountex, or whatever it might be, and you do get a bit of interaction with those and at least have an idea, and they do webinars to the accounting profession. But as a business owner, You don't get much of that at all. So I think we need to remember that we probably do know a little bit more than most clients, and a little bit more is enough. We don't need to know 100% of everything.
But also we know the basics of bookkeeping. So someone coming onto Xero who has a new business has to A, learn bookkeeping, B, learn Xero, and then have a look at the apps.
Yeah.
So we're miles ahead of them because we know how to do the core functions and then also some of the apps as well.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think just on that at the moment about, businesses have to learn all this stuff? I mean, we see the adverts, and I certainly think the fintech banking, where you've got things like Starling now, where they've got their own invoicing element, and I think you can do VAT returns and stuff like that. Do you think you'll find more self-starters who'll give it a go and then realize that actually there's a bit more to it and we need an expert? Do you think it'll go like that? What's your feel on that?
Yeah, I do. I also think that the giving it a go has become a bigger thing, because in the past you would just get the bank statements and then you'd have to go and do stuff. Whereas people now see the cloud accounting space as, oh, I can have a go at it. And I think they do have a go. And then, like you said, they realize it's not as simple as it might appear. And then that's when they need a bit of extra help. So there's going to be a bit of a space for training people to become basic bookkeepers, but also that bookkeeping offering is going to grow. Yeah. And that's something we're looking at Old Mill as well. So historically, we actually got rid of our bookkeeping service, but we brought it back in now that cloud's around, because it's so much easier to do. It's not as clunky as it used to be. We've got real-time access, and then that also can lead to a whole load of other services we can offer as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And that allows you as well that businesses are going to grow, right? They've gone and got Starling, and then maybe they've gone to a Xero, a QBO, a Sage, Business Cloud, whatever, free agent, whatever it's going to be after that. Keep my agnostic hat on. Yeah. But whatever they've gone to in that world, and you can get away with it a little bit for a period of time. But if you're growing, there becomes a period where you just don't know this. And I do think there's going to be people looking for that help. So I think it's a really poignant point around having some sort of lead gen and a way that those types of businesses can interact with you and collaborate with you in order for you to show some value to win the work. So I think that's going to be an interesting point for firms, really.
Yeah, I mean, we just took a client on this week who was in that situation. So
wow.
They were trying to do the bookkeeping themselves, and every time the money came into the bank, then they would mark it against the supplier, but there were no invoices in the system. So for her to work out what she owed suppliers, she needed to then get all the paper invoices, mark out which payments she'd made, and then whatever was left.
Yeah.
And the problem is, every Friday night she would spend 3 or 4 hours doing a bookkeeping, and then that's all valuable time which she could be spending with a family or a bit of extra work on the business. So I think going back to again what I like to do about this role, when we can get something in place for that person where it's all automated and saving them time, that's huge, isn't it?
Yeah, and really valued by those individuals who time poor and life's busy. Certainly start setting up your own businesses and getting it running. It takes a lot of time. So I think as well, what's interesting just listening to you there is how you can see that the clarity that I can help them this way straight away. And to that person who's sat in that, doing the sales, doing the operations, doing the bookkeeping, that's probably just not anything they can understand. So just somebody coming in and going, yeah, we just need to do a couple of things and we can do that and help you out and run that for you. We'll be like, okay, this person knows what they're talking about and they've got some tools and they're going to help out in other areas now.
Yeah, and in terms of showing value for money, those people are willing to pay for that because they can see the benefit straight away.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to that internal versus external battle, actually externally they go, do you know what, that'd be amazing, I'm happy to pay for that. So actually it's easy to work with clients than it is internally sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the accounting profession, we perceive what somebody will value and also assume quite a lot. And I think we have to just ask and offer, and people will say yes or no, or they'll say yes, no, or actually not now, but later on in the year or 12 months or whatever it might be. So the main thing with me is we just have to offer and have a service to make it commercially viable for us as a firm, but also good value for the client. But what we can't do is just assume that everyone's going to say no because they won't pay £100, £500, £5,000, whatever the price is. So that assumption thing we've got to get over, we've got to offer. So that's something to bear in mind for everyone.
I mean, you mentioned it as well on your course at some point where we can't give stuff away for free. And I think when I first started with this, someone would come to you and say, oh, I want to know about this app and whether it could work. And you say, okay, I'll go and research it. you go and research it for a couple of hours, you come back to them and they go, oh, that's great. How much is it? And you say, well, it's going to cost you 250 or 500 to implement, whatever. Oh, I'm not that interested.
Yeah.
Do you know? So that charging for that initial scoping exercise is so important because it filters out people that aren't serious.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the old serious or curious. So if you don't tell me that it's going to be a cost to it, I can't work out whether I'm serious or curious. And if it's 250 quid, then and I'll pay it, I'm serious about it, and it's worthwhile. But I think researching apps in general is just, God knows how much the profession is giving away in that time. I mean, I know we did it in Blue Hub early days back in 2015. People ring us, need this. So I've been there and miss the profit really on the P&L. Like, what's all this time spent and there's no return for it. So you have to have a process and a service in there to make sure you're working with people who are going to value it. And not everyone will, and that's fine. There's nothing we can do about that. We can't save everyone, as we say. Okay, cool. Next question. So what's been enjoyable about cloud from a personal perspective? You touched on enjoyment in general, actually, about this role, but what's been any key areas you've really enjoyed?
I guess being able to make a difference is massive. So when we were looking at the accounts, I'm not saying you can't make a difference with accounts, obviously, but it's just restricted because you're looking at historical data. Often you're past the year end. So in terms of tax saving strategies, you're past that point. So I think having the real-time information and then being able to make a difference there and then is huge. And the speed of innovation in this industry is so exciting, isn't it? I mean, we were stagnant for ages, and now we've had this cloud accounting and it's just exploded. So looking at the things that are coming on the market and then the diversity that brings to our role. So no longer are we just looking at the accounts, we're also looking at, potentially a bit of stock, not too complicated. Sales integrations. We're looking at expenses. We're looking at making payments on behalf of our customers. We're also looking at debt recovery.
Yep.
So I think having more diverse, that forward thinking.
Yeah, I think as well, like one of the complaints is we've got too much choice of the systems, right? And I think there's an element of that, but I think when you really dissect the ecosystem, there's a lot of diversity in there and like very specific niche products for a very certain type of business. But the flip side of that, if we don't have the diversity and the competition, we don't have the innovation. And actually the innovation is driven by the competition. So somebody does a feature, somebody else betters it. And that's why we do need that competition, because it just improves the overall product quality level for the accounting profession and the SME, which really helps us, for you as the intermediary of delivering that just really enables you much richer conversations longer term.
Isn't it interesting to see how the apps are developing as well, in terms of they're starting to merge with each other, or they're offering similar services? I've seen cash flow forecasting apps that are now offering funding services.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's vertical integration as well, which is interesting to see.
Definitely. I mean, the whole funding, certainly pre-pandemic, there seemed to be a real push towards the funding, the linkage with the funding, and that seems to be where it's going. And I know Intuit over in America, that's a huge part of their world, is the lending based on where your accounts are and being quite easy to lend that money, bearing in mind where the business is. So I'm intrigued to see how that picks back up once things start settling down pandemic-wise. But it's definitely an area to keep an eye on, absolutely. Okay. So question, and this can be business or not business, doesn't really matter, but in terms of like some favorite apps or tech, what's on your radar?
I have a couple, to be honest.
Okay.
So in terms of making a difference for the client, I think getting money in is important. So go cardless is a no-brainer, because so little people realize that it's out there and what you can do with it. You just raise an invoice. When that invoice becomes due, it takes the money, and not only does it take the money, it also reconciles back to the invoice.
Yeah.
So it's so easy from an operational point of view, but it also gets the money in quickly. And if someone won't sign up to a mandate, you've got to question why they're not signed up to a mandate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably not going to pay. So there's that one. Getting the information into the system would be something like Seatbank or Lightyear. So I looked into Lightyear recently.
Yep. More complex clients, more complex on the data incoming. Yeah.
It's more for when you have an invoice with several different things, like a Mole Valley fiber, etc. So you have to pull out the line items.
Yeah.
And then it will read the code of the line item and then post it to the right place. Whereas Seatbank will do it, so you have the line item extraction, but it has the same code and you have to overwrite them.
Yeah.
And then one which was a little bit more left field, which is probably one I use more in my own business, is one called Cinder.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of Cinder before.
No.
No. So what it does is it takes your Stripe transactions from the website. Mine actually go through Recharge, but then it goes through to Stripe. And then it will post them into Xero. So you disconnect your Stripe connection. You don't have that in Xero. You just have Cinder connected. Pulls the Stripe transactions in. It'll put the payment into your Xero, so it'll have the invoice value and then the charge. But it'll also do the actual invoice, so it does both sides. And then once it's done both sides, it also reconciles the two, so it marks it as paid. So what you end up doing is, like, for example, when I go into my bookkeeping, my accounts, it's automatically done. As soon as I get a sale come through, the invoice is in there, it's automatically marked as paid. And then we're starting to see more of these systems that will pull in different payment providers.
Yeah. So
they're quite restricted, Cinder, in terms of it just does Stripe, and I think it does Squarespace and a few others. But there are ones that will do PayPal and Stripe together. So then it pulls it into one system, and then it posts it into the Xero, but it posts it as reconciled.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, historically, what we've had to do with some of our clients is if we've connected the Stripe account, you go in there, and even if you manage to get the invoice in there somehow, you still have to click the green button.
Yeah.
And if you've got a subscription business which has like 1,000 subscriptions a month, you end up sitting there just clicking okay.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, I quite like that app, to be honest. That's
good. Well, it sounds like you need some shares in that, to be honest, because I'm sure that's an app that will get picked up and looked at from yours. But I think they're pretty good systems there, and like the Cinder does sound pretty interesting actually. So and good.
Yeah, there is alternatives. There's I think Quaderno is another one. Yeah, so that does your PayPal as well, I think.
Yeah, I think the Quaderno also manages your VAT treatment depending on region.
Yeah.
So it'll work out what region it is, and then how you treat that VAT wise. So, but yeah, I mean, this is what I mean. We've got so much. Even we're just talking about one area. There's probably 3 or 4 apps already, and it's all dependent on the client, right? So it could be they need a Quaderno or a Cinder, but that's why you need to know more about what they need really. So that's good. Okay, interesting. Okay, so in terms of the cloud, and there's going to be other people interested in cloud from an accounting perspective who are listening to this. What have you found like a challenge from a personal perspective with this? Because you've been aware of it. You've also got a business understanding of it from a business owner's perspective, and now you're starting to lead in a digital systems team. So what have been some of the challenges for you that you've found?
I think the challenges are more about getting the systems and processes in place. So it's all well and good going and doing an implementation, but if you just do that in isolation, so that knowledge sits with you, and you can't repeat it because you haven't noted down what you've done or how much it is. Then when you come to quote again, you don't know how much to quote because you're not quite sure how long it took, etc. So I think going through each of the individual apps or services that we want to offer. I say services, actually not apps, because you don't sell apps, you sell solutions, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then writing down the tasks that are involved in each one, and then mapping out how much we think that costs, and that could be a cost or it could be value to the client. And then the internal communication.
Yeah.
So that's something that I've been haven't been 100% correct on, in the sense that I've not communicated what we can do and what we can't do. Haven't educated people enough, and I think that's where some of the difficulties come internally, because advisor will try and use Xero, and then they say, well, Xero's a load of rubbish. And then actually what you dig into it and you go, well, it's because you're not quite using it right, because is the chart of accounts set up correctly? Are they getting the data in there correctly? That type of thing. And then, like I said earlier, they might go to client and say, we can do all these cool things, and it comes to you and you're just like, how on
earth? We can't.
We can't do that.
Yeah. And I think the key is, I think we do focus on the clients a lot, but I certainly think within your firm, if you're a small percentage of any size firm, it doesn't matter on the size. If you're 1 out of 10 people, you've still got to educate the other 90% that are there. But I think it's consistency, and it's just continuous. It's not like, I've seen lots of firms go, right, we've done a project to improve our invoice automation, right? And they do one project, one meeting, one big presentation, and then expect everyone to follow through. And I think we talked about this on the last accelerator group session that we did. It's about then what's the accountability and what's the individual's accountability. So if you want 10 more receipt banks every month, or hub docs or auto entries or whatever, then who is that attributed to, and how are you tracking that's actually happening or not? Because if you're just hoping that you're giving, hey, Wayne, you're going to do 10 next month, and everyone's busy doing their day job, if you don't come back and ask Wayne how he got on, likelihood it hasn't happened, and he won't think about the next month because nothing happened. So it's great to kick off the project, but you've just got to continually keep banging the drum. And actually the education doesn't even move on. I'm talking to firms now about stuff that I was talking about 5 years ago, and it's the same with some of your colleagues. They're going to be, some will have picked it up first time they spoke about it, others will need to hear it 5, 6, 7 times before it starts to resonate and see evidence of what it's doing.
Yeah, I think you raise another good point there as well about the data side of things, because extracting the data we need to then be able to segment our clients is a big thing. But also when it comes to holding people accountable, we need to know which clients relate to which offices, etc. So I think having an IT person in your team, if you're going to do like a digital business service team, is crucial.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree. Some sort of understanding of that world anyway, right? So you can utilize that. Okay. So I think, they're pretty standard challenges, and it's just consistency and continuation of that education, both with colleagues and clients and prospects as we go through that. I mean, you have not been involved in the cloud in terms of like delivering it ongoing for the firm that long, but is there anything that you would do differently or would have done earlier, knowing what you know now?
And I think it's probably that old adage, when you start the accelerator program, do each module as you go. That's probably the key that I would have done differently. Come up with a service I want to offer, nail that down in terms of what systems and processes are, the pricing, rather than moving on to the next one. And then you end up with 10 different things you're working on at the same time.
Yeah.
So I think having that focused approach is probably key, and starting simple as well. You don't need to offer everything on day one.
Yeah.
Deep dive is something you mentioned, which is really just looking at how someone uses Zero.
Yep.
So if you get to grips with how you use Zero, then you don't necessarily need the apps straight away. You start bolting them on. And then the other thing I would say would be the internal communication piece. That's something I'd do slightly differently.
Yeah.
Have a timeline of where we are, and also let people know where stuff can be found. So I've produced loads of stuff for them, put it on a DBS site, which they could access, but a lot of people don't know about it.
Yeah.
So produce all this great content, but no one's actually viewing it. So I think that's another thing, just banging home that message about it's there, it's available for you to use. Take a look.
So just getting really, really specific on you've learned about all the services like app implementation and support and training, digital health checks, the deep dives, migrations. If you were starting that again now, what would you focus on? No, you've got an idea of what they all do, and you're starting to implement them as a firm now. But if you were just concentrating on 2, what would you concentrate on?
I think I would concentrate on the health check in terms of bringing in Xavier to have a look at the quality of data, but then also the health check of the way they're using Zero.
Absolutely.
So that
client experience of you, data's good, but also client experience is what we need to monitor on the use of the systems, right?
Yeah, and then the other key thing is having some sort of invoice automation. So something like Receipt Bank, which is very simple to get your head around. So you're getting the data in, you're using Xavier to see if it's any good, and then you're helping people just use Zero a little bit better. That would be the starting point, I reckon.
Yeah, okay. And very early on, when we said we come back to it, we touched on about optimizing not just the cloud accounting, so in your case, just the Zero, because I think every firm be guilty of this who've been doing Zeros for over 3 years, is we implement it as it was on that day. So back in 2018, it's in there, or 2017, we implement that system and we leave them with it as the day they got trained on it, and then never return to see if there's any new functions, features, their business has changed, that might need some more use of some other functions. Have you seen that as you've gone through your sort of journey with understanding this cloud world a bit more?
Yeah, I have. I saw it very recently with a client, actually. So I had a look back at them and I did a health check on them and seeing how they were using the software. At the time when we put them on board, which was a good couple of years ago, we trained them quite extensively.
Yeah.
But then when I sent him so I did a Loom video for him and I sent it over, like some
Good
of the stuff.
Loom.
Yeah.
My favorite.
He loved it. Yeah, he thought there's so much great ideas in there because the system has developed.
Right.
The extra reports, you got the cash flow forecasting, etc.
So really they don't know what they don't know. So we've introduced them to the software, so we've got to keep them updated on the software, whether that's like once a year or twice a year. Here's some new updates. But yeah, like you did, you've done the deep dive, understand how they're using it, understanding what they could more, whether that's more use of the core system or whether that's additional apps for solutions to their problems. But yeah, I think we've got to be careful of that, because I think in the accounting profession we didn't see that many updates and feature improvements that quickly. A bit like you were saying earlier about how quick this world is. We didn't used to see that in desktop world. It might be an update or one or two a year, perhaps, of real, but each month or quarter, there's plenty of this stuff absolutely flying through with additional features and functions.
Yeah, this is one of those things you could implement into your support package, isn't it? You could do, if you're paying for a support package, maybe every 6 months you do a zero deep dive for that client. Maybe it's something you could do in your year-end accounts. So it's factoring into your existing processes to make sure you take that time just to have a look at their data.
Yeah.
And how they're using it.
And just so people got an idea, how long for your deep dive? So yeah, you've got the Xavier, which is bringing the data quality in. You've got something on there, and then you're doing like the customer experience type of view of how they're using it. How long do you reckon that's taking you now? You've got to grips with what the process is and the templates.
It doesn't take long, maybe a couple hours to do.
Yeah, so you're giving it a couple of hours, but if you're doing that once a year as part of an initial engagement, it's no biggie to spend that time, is it? I suppose you do it a couple of times.
I mean, that's the perfect time, really. If you engage a new client as well, to do that health check and then to do the deep dive, because they're more open to change at that point.
Yeah.
We've just moved accountants, and yeah, you can wow them with everything you know about Xero and start getting it in place. And it's a good client experience for them, because initially what happens is you sign someone up and then you don't do anything for them for the first 12 months because you're waiting for the year end to pass. So, I mean, if you can actually get something in place where you give them value straight away, I mean, that's massive.
Yeah. And you mentioned Loom, so I love Loom. I've got no shares. I should have got it years ago in it. But I just love the idea of giving short, sharp information, watch it in your own time, Netflix-esque. I think it works for a lot of people. What are you using Loom for? Like, what sort of interactions are you using Loom for?
I'm using it both internally and externally.
Okay.
So I've upgraded from the 5-minute video.
Good
because
man.
That was frustrating trying to just cram it in there. But yeah, we use it for educating people internally. So share the screen. This is how it works. Then they can watch it whenever they want. You can also see who's watched it, if they signed in. And then the other thing is, like you said, as a deliverable to the client. So there'll be an article, probably there'll be an email, but also there'll be the Loom video. And that's because people absorb information in different ways. So they like to read it or they like to watch it.
Yeah.
Personally, I'd rather watch a video than look at a whole page of text. But then other people might not. So I think you have different forms. Yeah,
you got to cater for all. But in terms of client engagement, like what gives an example, a couple of examples of what you've used Loom for? Like was it a Xero support query? Was it a proposal? Was it a I don't know. What was it? How are you using it?
Yeah, proposal was one. Yeah, I've done a couple of those.
Okay.
And I generally tend to do it with a health check.
Yeah, okay.
So what I'll do is I'll have the Xavier report. I won't have the Xavier software. I'll just have the report up, the PDF. And then I'll talk through all the different areas, because some of them there's errors in there, like dormant accounts. And if they're a new company, you go, okay, you don't need to worry about this too much, but you might want to have a look at these areas. And then you can just explain what it means a bit more as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's the Xero deep dive about how they might use Xero a bit better. You could use it just for anything. Yeah.
Yeah, literally, I think you can, but it's really interesting to hear somebody who's practically using it and what's really helping you. So you've got the pre-engagement, and then you've got during the client engagement, you've got different ways to work with them and collaborate. So that's great. Okay. So what's the aim for the next 12 months? If we have a catch up in 12 months time, like what do you hope to have achieved?
Well, hopefully. So what I want to do first of all is finish off the existing offerings that we've got. So I want to focus on the management accounts, maybe getting a tiered approach as well. So you have different types of management accounts which fit different clients. Then I want to have the cash flow forecasting in place. Mm-hmm. And the idea is, so at Old Mill, we have advisors, and then they'll have a pack of information. So the data will be good. And if the data isn't good, we've got health checks in place. So we can improve that data. We've got a few services there. They'll have some management accounts. They'll have a cash flow forecast, and then they go speak to clients. And I think originally it's just going to be a case of getting those in place. And then I want to have a look back at the existing services we've got and make sure that we've got the systems and processes and pricing right. And then I want to build a few more resources for the advisors, make sure they know it's there. And once we've got all that in place, it's mass rollout. Then it's a case of, right, okay, we know what we're doing. Let's try and push it out.
So scale it at that point, and you've got the systems behind that. You've got the collateral in terms of these are the packs. This is what we deliver, and really get that in place. And one thing I wanted to offer you, one thing I wanted to ask you actually, just to finish off, is now you've got some of those services in place, and you know when you're speaking to a client, you might even know where you're probably going to go, what the next step is. Has that improved your confidence in terms of delivery and what to say? Whether you're happy with someone says yes or no, and has that like returned income where maybe you weren't getting income before?
Yeah, definitely increased confidence, because we've done it a few times and we know how happy clients are once we've done it.
Yeah.
What's the second point?
Second point was, it's great to have the confidence, but now does that turn into revenue in terms of like the services you're offering, because it's clear what the service is and what the outcome is, which means the client will say yes or no based on whether they value it or not, right?
Yeah, the money side of things is something that, like I said before, we weren't that initial research phase we weren't charging for.
Mm-hmm.
But I think now that we know what some of the solutions are and actually what goes into research, I'm much more happy to charge for it.
Yeah.
And once you've got that confidence and you're talking to the client, you say, this is how much it is. And then also what's really important is to have what you're going to do for that.
Yes.
So rather than we're going to onboard you, this is what we're going to do. These are the steps, because then they can start to picture it in their mind and say, okay, I know what I'm paying for.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, if I don't pay for it, who's going to do that, right? If you say I'm going to do migration to zero, or I'm just going to do some app research and recommendation, like to see that one line, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
If you split that down to 5 to 10 to 15, these are the activities. Okay, I'm not going to do that because I don't understand what half of them are, but obviously you guys do. So I think it's really important to show what you're going to go through in order to get the outcome they want. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you wouldn't go to, having a clear price as well, because you wouldn't go to car garage, put it in there and say, have unlimited funds to go and fix this. I don't even know what you're going to do, but just have unlimited funds. So a client can quite easily be worried about how much they're going to spend with you. So you really need to say that this is how much we think it's going to be, and this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, it's that qualification, right? So just to let you know, Matt, it's going to be a minimum of 250 quid, but it could be £1,000.
Yeah.
Okay, that's up to me then, whether I've got 250 quid or value 250 quid, and whether I value £1,000. But at least you're in a conversation straight up around, okay, I can probably max at £500 on this. Well, okay, you can get this for £500, and then you're working with them on a budget. And I think just not having that revenue or that cost conversation sooner just means you all drag it out, and the longer it goes on, the worse that conversation is going to feel to everybody, because, well, I wouldn't have done all this if I'd known there's going to be a cost to it. So it's really important, but that's the joy of having set services and ranges of prices for those services. That allows you then to really structure the conversations and lead the client to make their own decision.
Yeah, plus it builds up for the client. If you don't say, like, this is research, this is implementation, you suddenly get to the end of the project and you've done all this work and they go, wow, you've given me a bill for like £2,000 here or something.
Yeah.
Whereas if you break it down and you do the bill for the research, then you do the implementation, it's a lot easier for them to digest.
Yeah, it's a lot more palatable, isn't it, when they understand it's been a few services, not just this one big thing. So brilliant. Right. Well, we'll wrap it there, Wayne. Thanks a lot for your insights. And just some of your experience has been really interesting. Obviously, we've been working quite closely together, so it's been great to see how you've grown into this position and taking it forward. So I'm excited to see what the next 12 months brings for you and the firm. Actually, it'd be pretty interesting. If you've enjoyed this, those of you listening to this, it's all about journeys of people who are trying to get ahead in the cloud and trying to progress in the cloud. So subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all those great spaces. But Wayne, just to finish off, thank you very much. That's been really valuable, and look forward to catching up with you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, Wayne.
Cheers, bye.